It was supposed to be my breakthrough, the moment everything I'd worked for finally paid off. I'd spent the last 4 years juggling 2 jobs, maintaining a 4.0 GPA, and volunteering on weekends, all in hopes of landing a prestigious full-ride international scholarship for a PhD program in biomedical science. My professors called me the one to watch. I was shortlisted. All I needed was one last thing, a recommendation letter from a reputable reference. Enter my mother-in-law. She's a retired professor and an alumni fellow at the very same university offering the scholarship. I thought, who better to write my final recommendation? She smiled when I asked, her eyes gleaming just a bit too much. Of course, darling. It would be my honor to write it. Anything for family. Pause. Before I go on, if you're already gripping your phone or biting your nails wondering what happened next, do me a small favor. Click that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear is a story of betrayal, humiliation, and revenge so sharp, it left scars in places I didn't even know I had. Okay, back to the story. She handed me the sealed envelope a day before the submission deadline. I didn't think twice. I attached it with the rest of my application materials and submitted everything online. 10 days later, I got the rejection email. No explanation. No feedback. Just a curt message saying I was no longer being considered due to integrity concerns flagged during internal vetting. Integrity concerns? I was stunned. I hadn't lied, plagiarized, cheated, nothing. I emailed the selection committee. They didn't respond. I called. No answer. 3 nights later, at a small family dinner, she sat across from me slicing her steak slowly, her rings clinking against her wine glass. And then she said it. Let's be honest, sweetheart. Your place is here. Supporting my son. Not chasing some fantasy in a foreign lab. A woman should know where she belongs. I excused myself from the table, drove home in silence, and cried until my pillow was soaked. But something kept gnawing at me. What if? The next morning, I went to her study while she was out. She never locked it. I found a copy of the letter on her desktop under a folder called Recommendations. I clicked, and what I read turned my stomach. While she is passionate, I fear she lacks the emotional resilience and mental stability for the pressures of advanced research. In my opinion, her talents may be better suited to domestic life where she thrives. I printed the letter. I gathered every email exchange we'd had. Then I sent everything, the fake recommendation, the conversation at dinner I'd secretly recorded on my smartwatch, and my full application history, to the university's ethics board. What I didn't know was that the head of that board had once been her rival, professionally and personally. And he had no idea what she'd just done. You'd think a betrayal like that would send someone spiraling. And for a few days it did. I avoided everyone. I ignored my husband's questions. I stayed off social media. It felt like my dreams had been punctured by a dagger sharpened by the one person I trusted to support them. But then something shifted. Anger. Not just any anger, the cold, methodical kind. The kind that doesn't yell. It plans. Because you don't get to assassinate my future and sip wine like it's nothing. I'd submitted the evidence to the university's ethics board through their confidential online whistleblowing portal. At that time, I didn't even know who ran it. I just wanted anyone to see what she had done, to validate that I wasn't insane. A week passed. Then I got a call from an unknown number. A deep voice, clipped and professional. Hello, this is Dr. Anthony Kelmore, head of academic ethics at the university. I received your report regarding Professor Margaret Halston, your mother-in-law, correct? My heart thudded. Yes, sir. That's correct. I've reviewed the files. I must say, this isn't her first time walking a thin line. But this is another level. That's when I learned something very important. Dr. Kelmore and Margaret Halston used to serve on the same research council over a decade ago. She sabotaged one of his grant proposals, anonymously, of course, and the scandal nearly cost him his tenure. She thought she was untouchable. But everyone's time comes. You're not going to hear anything publicly for now, he said. But know this, we take these reports very seriously. Thank you for coming forward. Click. Something in me exhaled for the first time in weeks. The rift at home. Meanwhile, things at home were starting to sour. My husband, Josh, was confused, frustrated. He'd applied to transfer to the city where my program would have been. Now that plan was dead. I didn't tell him about the letter. Not yet.
Why?
Because deep down, he always took his mother's side. She's just protective, he'd say. She doesn't mean harm. But she did. She always had. Small comments over the years. You sure you want to go to grad school? Wouldn't it be nicer to start a family? Don't work too hard. Men like a woman who's soft and available. You'll never get that promotion if you're too assertive. You know how women are perceived. I'd let them slide. I thought I was being the bigger person. But her letter proved something. She wasn't harmless. She was a strategic underminer. The Whisper Network. While waiting for the university to respond officially, I started digging. Quietly. I reached out to other young women she had mentored over the years. A few of them I remembered from family barbecues, shy PhD candidates, assistant lecturers, even administrative interns. All of them praised her publicly. But when I reached out privately, the DMs flooded in. She sabotaged me in front of the grant committee. She told my advisor I was unstable after I declined to babysit her granddaughter. She rewrote my research proposal and submitted her version, under her name. Suddenly, I realized something. This wasn't just about me. It never had been. The leak. I was at the grocery store when I got a message from Dr. Kelmore. Just a link. I tapped. It was a leaked internal memo. Someone on the ethics board must have been just as pissed as I was. A preliminary investigation has revealed unethical interference with the application process for the Royal Scholars Grant. The individual in question has been temporarily suspended from committee duties and will face a formal hearing. The memo didn't name her. But the title of the leaked document? Case number 1149, Professor Margaret Halston, Conflict of Interest and Academic Misconduct. I stood there in aisle 4, frozen between a pack of quinoa and almond milk, smiling like an idiot. She'd be furious. The dinner explosion. The next Sunday, we went to her house for dinner, again. Josh insisted. Let's just be normal. Please. I said okay. We arrived. She opened the door in pearls and red lipstick like she was auditioning for a Step Forward wife reboot. Darling, she smiled, you look well-rested. I didn't respond. Over roasted lamb and asparagus, she chatted about nonsense, opera, traffic, Josh's new job. Then, casually, oh, I heard there's a leak in the ethics department. Very unprofessional. It's so easy to accuse someone these days. Anonymous reports, you know? Her voice was velvet, but her eyes, they were knives. I sipped my wine. Yes, Margaret. Sometimes it only takes a single letter to destroy someone's future. Josh looked between us, blinking. What are you guys talking about? I leaned forward. Your mother knows, don't you, Margaret? How it feels to ruin someone with a few careful words. Silence. Then she snapped. You ungrateful little witch. I wrote what I had to. You would have thrown your marriage away to chase a fantasy. I did you a favor. Josh looked stunned. Mom, what are you saying? She froze. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. The recording of our last dinner, her little confession about a woman knowing her place. Josh listened, pale. He turned to her. You sabotaged her? She hissed. Don't be dramatic. He got up. No. You manipulated me for years. You crossed a line. She turned to me, shaking. You think you've won? You think this will get you into that scholarship now? You're delusional. I stood slowly. No, Margaret. I think you've just been disarmed. Collateral damage. Josh didn't speak to her for weeks after that. He moved in with me temporarily. He didn't say much. He just stared at the floor a lot. She called, left voicemails, begged, threatened lawsuits, told him I was a master manipulator. But the wheels were already turning. 3 former ments submitted statements to the ethics board. One of them had even saved an email from Margaret telling her to stay out of the limelight and let the men shine. And then came the final twist. The Karma Committee. Dr. Kelmore called again. We've concluded our investigation. Margaret Halston is being permanently removed from all university-affiliated boards and councils. She's also losing her emeritus privileges. But that wasn't the part that made me choke on my tea. By the way, he added, one of our senior fellows read your original application. He was impressed. He thinks the scholarship committee made a mistake by letting a biased reference destroy your chances. He's offering you a spot, full funding, at our sister program in Geneva, if you're still interested. I don't remember what I said. I just remember sitting on the floor, crying, laughing. I texted Josh. I'm going. You're welcome to come with me. But I'm not staying here anymore. Not in her shadow. He replied a few minutes later. Then I guess I'll pack my bags. 5 days after the call from Dr. Kelmore, I stood in the guest room with an open suitcase and 1,000 racing thoughts. The Geneva program was real. Fully funded. Starts in 6 weeks. And the most terrifying part? I had no reason to say no. Josh had moved in with me officially. He was quieter than usual. Thoughtful. Cautious. Even like someone waking up from anesthesia after years of being lulled to sleep. He was angry with her. But he was also ashamed. Because, in his own way, he'd let her shape his thinking about me, about what marriage should look like, about the limits women should respect. We didn't talk about Geneva much. Until one night over takeout, he finally asked, do you really want to go? Go? For years. I put my fork down. Josh, I almost lost everything because I trusted someone who thought I belonged in her living room, not a lab. I have to go. Not just for me, but for every girl she's crushed before. He nodded. Then I'll come with you. Margaret's new world. Isolation. We didn't hear from her for 2 weeks. Then 3. The silence? Blissful. But silence has layers. And Margaret's silence was the kind that plots. I learned through a former colleague that she'd been ostracized from several academic circles. No more panels. No more honors. Her name, once plastered across plaques and plaques of achievement, was being softly erased. Not by force. By shame. Apparently, she tried to call in favors, but the university's ethics board had made their stance quietly public. Emails began circulating. Testimonials were being shared in confidence. Doors she'd ruled for decades began to creak shut. One postdoctoral student told me via email, we were warned for years that she had power. But now we know it was fear, not respect. And that fear is gone. A new type of freedom. The flight to Geneva was long. We held hands the entire way. Not romantically. Not desperately. Just aware. We both knew this was a beginning forged from a very ugly end. When we landed, the city sparkled under a soft September sun. Josh got a job teaching ESL at a local academy. I threw myself into my research. For the first time in forever, I existed without explanation. No one knew I was someone's wife, or daughter-in-law, or anything other than me, an ambitious, slightly tired woman with dark circles and burning dreams. My supervisor, Dr. Lena Roussel, was the opposite of Margaret. Encouraging, demanding, fair. I remember her saying during our first lab orientation, science is not for the faint-hearted. But don't ever let anyone mistake your strength for threat. Let your work speak. And let your silence terrify them when they try to take credit for it. I wanted to cry right there in the sterile, fluorescent hallway. The letter from hell goes viral. 3 months into my program, a link hit my inbox. It was from an anonymous Reddit account. I clicked. Title. And Miles sabotaged my dream with a fake recommendation letter, so I gave it to her worst enemy. It was my story. Every detail. The scholarship. The letter. The recording. The revenge. Someone had found out and posted it under r/pro-revenge. The post blew up. 300,000 upvotes. Thousands of comments. People were enraged. Inspired. Shaken. And in the comments, dozens of women from different universities chimed in. OMG. She did this to me in 2017. I applied for a teaching assistant position under her. She said I smiled too much and rescinded my contract. That woman made me cry in a lecture hall. I'm still healing. And then someone posted a photo of her. Grainy. Taken from a university website that hadn't updated yet. Caption: "Is this the witch?" The comments exploded. Josh and I stared at my phone for hours that night. He rubbed his temples. "This is insane." I said quietly, "No. This is justice." The reckoning back home. Her reputation was already in shreds. But now she was infamous. Even the local press in our hometown caught wind. One small academic blog ran the headline: "Respected professors fall from grace. Decades of power. One scandal too many." The ethics board issued a formal statement. They didn't name me, but they said, "The university upholds the highest standard of ethics and mentorship." A recent case has highlighted the dangers of personal bias and abuse of influence within academia. "We are restructuring our recommendation protocols effective immediately." She didn't take it well. I know because she finally emailed me. The email, verbatim. Subject: "You've made a mistake. I don't expect you to understand the damage you've caused. You've made me a laughing stock. You've cost me everything I built. But I want you to know something. Josh will grow to resent you. You've dragged his family through the mud. And one day, when your ambition burns you out, when you've climbed too high and realize no one's holding the ladder, you'll wish you'd stayed where you belonged. Not every woman is meant to lead. Some of us should just support. Enjoy your time in the spotlight. It won't last. Margaret." I didn't reply. Instead, I printed it, highlighted her last line in pink, and taped it on the wall above my desk. Not as a trophy, as a warning, a reminder. Fuel. Because women like Margaret don't need to scream to control you. They whisper. They smile. They say they know best. And they're often the first ones to pull the ladder up after they've climbed it. The shift in Josh. Geneva changed both of us. Josh took language classes, made friends, started going to therapy for the first time in his life. One night, over coffee, he looked at me with misty eyes. I used to think strength in a woman meant coldness, or masculinity, or being too much. But now I see it's just truth. You told your truth, and I'm proud of you. I squeezed his hand. I didn't say, "I forgive you," because I wasn't ready for that yet. But I said, "Thank you." And that was enough. The uninvited guest. Exactly 6 months after my arrival, we held a small dinner party at our flat. Just classmates, lab partners, Josh's new colleagues. There was laughter, red wine, a small stereo playing Nina Simone in the background, and then a knock at the door. Josh answered, and froze. It was a courier. Package for Miss Halston. I signed. It was a small white box. No return address. Inside, a framed photograph. Margaret, younger, in a lab coat, surrounded by male professors. And on the back, a note in her handwriting. "Once I was you, and they broke me. I just didn't realize I became one of them." No apology. No explanation. Just a crack in the armor. I wrapped the photo back in the tissue paper and tucked it away in a drawer I rarely opened. Closure isn't clean. People love revenge stories because they want neat endings. The villain falls. The hero triumphs. The credits roll. But real revenge? Real justice? It's messy. Margaret didn't go to jail. She didn't lose her home. She didn't die penniless and alone. But she lost her legacy, her power, her voice in the rooms she once ruled. And that's a scar she'll feel every time she walks past a university plaque without her name. As for me, I don't sleep with rage anymore. I sleep with purpose. Because I know I didn't just survive what she did, I flipped it. I built something from the ashes. I am becoming the woman she feared I would. And every time I walk into the lab, every time I pick up a pipette or submit a paper, I whisper to myself, "Let's be honest, Margaret, I never belonged in your shadow." By month 7 in Geneva, I had finally stopped waking up with the taste of old anger on my tongue. That bitterness? It doesn't just vanish. It recedes slowly, like tidewater pulling secrets back into the ocean. but it never truly leaves. What has happened, though, is you stop giving it power. Instead of clenching my jaw over what Margaret had done, I poured myself into research. I taught a few undergrad seminars on ethics in biochemistry. I even started co-authoring papers with Dr. Roussel. I wasn't just catching up to the life I lost. I was outpacing it. The mentorship I deserved. One icy February morning, Dr. Roussel called me into her office. Her space was cozy in a way Margaret's never was. Lots of plants, handwritten sticky notes, even a small jar of chocolates labeled for days that feel too long. She offered me one. I declined. "I've nominated you," she said. I blinked. For what? The Roche Women in Science Fellowship. Prestigious, competitive, and overdue, if you ask me. I sat there in stunned silence. Then I laughed. Ironic, isn't it? The last time I had a nomination in my hands, someone I trusted torched it to the ground. She nodded. Then maybe this time, someone who believes in you should help rebuild it. That moment? It was like a crack of light breaking through a storm-drenched ceiling. The message that changed everything. A week later, I got a DM on Instagram from someone I didn't recognize. Profile photo: a woman, early 30s, holding a baby. Username @ScienceMom84. Message: "Hi. I don't mean to bother you, but I was a student of Margaret's. I saw the Reddit post. I just want to say thank you for being brave, for surviving her." I replied. Then came another message. Then another. Then 20 more. A wave of women from different walks of life. Undergrads, researchers, even someone who'd briefly worked with Margaret on a Women in STEM panel, all saying the same thing. She scared me. She silenced me. I wish I'd said something. So, I did something Margaret never expected. I created a network. Women Without Permission. It started as a private Telegram group. I called it Women Without Permission, a space for women who'd been gatekept, undermined, or manipulated in academia by those who claimed to support them. We didn't scream. We documented. We advised. We healed. Soon it spread across universities: Geneva, Berlin, New York, Johannesburg. It was small at first. Then a science magazine caught wind and wrote a story titled "Burned by Mentorship: The Hidden Epidemic in Women's Academia." I never said Margaret's name. I didn't have to. Her shadow was already shrinking. Mine was growing longer. Josh's family crumbles. Meanwhile, things back home were, well, messy. Josh's younger sister, Erica, called one evening, clearly shaken. "She's still pretending it's all lies," she whispered. "Even told her church group that you faked the letter. That you were the manipulator." I was quiet. "She's falling apart, though," Erica added. Her department friends stopped inviting her to events. "She's not lecturing. And she refuses to admit she did anything wrong." I could have gloated, but instead, I just felt empty. Because I wasn't chasing her downfall anymore. I was building a world where she didn't exist. And that was far more powerful. The seminar. In March, I was invited to speak at a summit on gender equity in science. It was a modest conference. No cameras. Just a sea of brilliant minds, mostly women, mostly tired of being told no. Wait, or you're lucky to be here. When I stepped on stage, I didn't open with data or theory. I opened with the truth. A woman once wrote a recommendation letter that cost me the biggest opportunity of my life. She didn't do it because I was unqualified. She did it because she believed my place was in a kitchen beside her son, not in a lab. But here's the twist. That betrayal? It didn't end me. It rewired me. I could see it in their eyes, recognition. That familiar sting of invisible shackles. When I finished, the room was silent for a beat. Then came the applause. Not polite, not mechanical, but heavy, earnest. Like they were clapping for themselves, too. The unraveling of a matriarch. Around the same time, Margaret made a move. A desperate one. She published an op-ed in a regional academic newsletter titled "Cancel Culture in Academia, a Cautionary Tale." She didn't mention my name, but she wrote about vindictive young women, and fragile egos. The piece went viral. For the wrong reasons. The backlash was swift. Students penned rebuttals. Faculty leaders publicly distanced themselves. One prominent professor tweeted, "If you're more upset about being exposed than about what you did, you don't deserve a classroom." The final blow? The newsletter issued a public apology. "We regret publishing a piece that undermines accountability and uplifts abusers." I never responded to it. Not publicly. Because every time she screamed louder, I just kept building. The night Josh let go. One rainy April evening, Josh stood by our window watching the lights of Geneva flicker through the storm. He held a glass of wine untouched. Do you think she ever loved me? Like, truly loved me? Or was I just her puppet? I walked over and took the glass from his hand. "I think she loved the version of you that obeyed. The version she sculpted." He nodded. Then, "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. What she was doing to you. To us." I wrapped my arms around him. "You weren't ready, but now you are. And that's enough." He exhaled, like something ancient was finally leaving his lungs. That night, he unfollowed her on social media. Then, he blocked her number. One last visit. A month later, we flew back to the States for a conference. Just a week. I didn't tell her, but somehow she found out. We were grabbing coffee downtown when she appeared, trench coat, red lipstick, the usual performance of composure. She didn't look well. Older, weaker, haunted. "So," she said, smiling tightly, "off to rub shoulders with more of your victims?" I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't feel rage. I felt pity. "You could have been a legend, Margaret," I said softly. "Instead, you became the warning." Her jaw tightened. "Don't flatter yourself. You're just another girl with a hashtag." I tilted my head. Maybe. But I'm not the one who vanished. And with that, I walked away. Josh followed. He didn't look back. She didn't call after us. She just stood there, in the fading light, a relic of a dying empire she built with cruelty and control. A letter from Geneva. Back in Europe, I received an envelope. Inside, a certificate. Recipient, Dr. Halston. Award, Excellence in Ethical Leadership in STEM. Category, Advocacy and Reform. I smiled. It wasn't from the university. It was from the Women Without Permission Network. They made the award. They named it after me. And that was the moment I knew. Margaret didn't break me. She revealed me. She forced the fire to come forward. And now, I wasn't just surviving. I was leading. There's a moment in every long battle when you realize you're no longer defending yourself. You're winning. You're not reacting to the fire. You are the fire. And Margaret? She was still clutching a fire extinguisher long after the blaze had moved on. The internal investigation begins. 2 weeks after our return to Geneva, I got an encrypted email from a name I hadn't seen in almost a year. Professor Leila Nguyen, former deputy dean of the university where I'd lost my scholarship. She'd been quietly advocating for a full ethics probe into Margaret's past. What I didn't know then was this. My case wasn't the first. It wasn't even the fifth. It was just the first that had evidence. Dr. Nguyen wrote, "Your submission to the ethics board opened a formal review. But your story triggered something deeper, other victims. Hidden letters. Whispers of misconduct dating back over 15 years. We're now pursuing a pattern. A pattern. That word echoed in my head for hours. Because I remembered the way Margaret once spoke about helping young women navigate their careers. I remembered the award she received for mentorship excellence. And now, that title would never be spoken again without a footnote, my footnote. Women Without Permission goes public. Until then, our network was private, quiet, healing behind closed screens. But when I read Dr. Nguyen's message, something shifted in me. I reached out to the group. If we're serious about protecting others, we need to tell the truth publicly. Not just anonymously, but loudly. With names. With dates. It wasn't a popular idea. Many of them still feared academic retaliation. Or simply couldn't relive it. But a few brave voices joined. We launched a website, womenwithoutpermission.org. It featured essays, recordings with consent, redacted letters of rejection, and even screenshots of microaggressions cloaked in mentorship. Every piece vetted, every identity respected. And on the homepage, a single quote. You don't have to burn the system down. You just have to show people the rot beneath the paint. The site exploded. Articles, podcast interviews, donations. And then came a letter from The Lancet, one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world. They asked if I'd write a personal reflection for their upcoming issue on power and gender in modern academia. And so I did. The title? The Letter That Tried to Silence Me. Margaret's Retirement, or something like it. While we were publishing Truth, Margaret was rebranding. The university announced her early retirement in a tiny, tucked-away email bulletin. No ceremony, no farewell lecture, no honorary goodbye gift. But we knew the truth. She was forced out. A leaked memo from the Board of Trustees later confirmed that she'd violated the university's mentorship code, a clause quietly introduced the year before. Her pension remained intact, but her reputation? Ravaged. Someone emailed us her Rate My Professor page. Every glowing comment from years past had been buried under. She destroyed my confidence. I thought I was the problem. Turns out I was the target. Don't call it mentorship if it comes with a leash. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. Josh makes a decision. Back in Geneva, Josh was thriving. He'd started teaching English at a refugee center and was now pursuing a certificate in cross-cultural education. One morning over coffee, he told me, I've been offered a permanent position. They want me to lead a training initiative. But there's one catch. It's in Berlin. My stomach flipped. But I didn't show it. Do you want to go? He hesitated. Do you want me to go? I smiled softly. I want you to grow. That afternoon, he accepted the position. We didn't call it a breakup. We called it a pause with purpose. Because this wasn't about walking away. It was about walking toward. And after everything we'd survived, that freedom felt like the rarest gift of all. An invitation with a twist. A month later, I received an email from the university that had once rejected me. Dear Dr. Halston, as part of our restructuring of the International Scholarship Committee, we would be honored to invite you as a guest speaker to our upcoming Global Fellowship Conference. We believe your insight into academic ethics, resilience, and reform would enrich our audience greatly. It felt surreal. This was the same institution that had once accepted Margaret's sabotage without question. The same place that had emailed me a bland rejection and never asked why. Now, they wanted my voice at the center of their policy reforms. I said yes. But I made one condition clear. I'll speak. But only if it's a panel of diverse voices, not just me. I won't be your redemption badge. They agreed. I chose the other 3 speakers myself, all women from our network. All former targets of academic suppression. It wasn't about reclaiming the podium. It was about building a new one. The final email from Margaret. 3 days before the conference, I received one last message. Subject, closure. You've won. I hope it was worth it. I hope the spotlight keeps you warm. I hope the applause fills the hole inside you. But someday, when the world moves on and the headlines fade, I hope you remember. I gave you your start. Without me, you'd still be folding resumes in your husband's apartment. Good luck, doctor. I stared at the screen. This wasn't regret. It wasn't even resentment. It was fear, disguised as arrogance. So I replied, only one sentence. Without you, I'd still have my silence and no story to tell. So yes, thank you. I will remember you. Then I archived the thread. Forever. The conference. The room was packed. Students, faculty, donors, even a few international journalists. The topic, mentorship or manipulation, rebuilding trust in academia. I stood at the podium in a crisp navy blazer, the same color Margaret once wore like armor. But I wasn't armored. I was open, firm, focused. And when I spoke, I didn't dwell on her name. I didn't weaponize my pain. I honored it. This is not a story of revenge. It's a story of repair, of rebuilding the world after someone burned it down around you, and making sure the next person who walks through doesn't get singed. The applause didn't thunder. It rose, like a tide that had been waiting to meet shore. Legacy. By year's end, Women Without Permission became an official nonprofit. We launched a mentorship certification program, partnered with several universities to offer workshops. One of our most popular modules? How to write a recommendation letter that lifts, not leashes. The irony still makes me smile. My career didn't just recover. It evolved. I became a senior researcher, then a lecturer. I spoke at conferences in Lisbon, Kyoto, Cape Town. And at every stop, I met another woman who whispered the same thing. I didn't know we were allowed to speak like this. And I always said the same thing back. We always were. We just needed each other to remember. Absolutely. Here's chapter 6 of your revenge story. The most dangerous lie academia ever told us? That power is inherited. That authority is granted by titles, tenure, or old handshakes in quiet rooms. But I had seen what power really looked like now. It's not inherited, it's seized. And it's kept only when wielded responsibly. Margaret had tried to pass her legacy on like a cursed heirloom. But I wasn't interested in what she left behind. I was too busy building something she could never corrupt. A scholarship born of ruin. The irony of what came next wasn't lost on me. I was mid-lecture one afternoon, dissecting the ethical failure of 20th century pharmaceutical trials, when I got a text from Geneva's development dean. Call me. Urgent but good. That same evening, we sat in the university cafe. The dean slid a packet across the table. It read, "The Halston Grant, Advancing Ethics and Equity in STEM." I blinked. Is this real? Entirely. Alumni and external donors are funding it. Your story sparked something. They want your name on it. You'd sit on the selection board. I stared down at the papers. The grant amount? 6 figures. It would support 2 female researchers from marginalized backgrounds each year, covering tuition, housing, and full mentorship placement. Real mentorship. I said yes. But before I signed, I added a clause. Recipients must also be trained in how to recognize academic coercion. We're not just producing scholars. We're producing watchdogs. She nodded. Approved. And so it began. A scholarship born from sabotage, not just rebuilt, but reimagined. Josh comes back. Berlin had been good for him. It sharpened his eyes, steadied his voice. He didn't look over his shoulder as much anymore. We met in Amsterdam for a weekend seminar. When I saw him standing by the train terminal, holding a single sunflower like a fool, I laughed and almost cried at the same time. Over stroopwafels and late-night canal walks, he said. I'm moving to Zurich. Closer. Still doing the work. But I don't want distance to define us anymore. I didn't need time to think. Then let's do this right. On our terms. Not his mother's. Not academia's. Ours. Margaret's final vanishing act. Not long after, a curious email thread landed in my inbox. Subject: Margaret Weston, removal from panel review board. Apparently, she'd still held a minor advisory position at a scientific publisher, one that reviewed emerging grant proposals. Until now, someone had submitted a complaint. Not from me, not from our network, from a man. A young doctoral candidate she'd reportedly discouraged from applying to a position because, quote, your emotional sensitivity may make you an unstable team leader. He recorded the conversation. And it was enough. Her name was scrubbed. Her credentials retired. No press release. No grand exit. Just a slow, administrative erasure. Exactly how women had been erased for generations. Now, the pendulum had swung back, quiet but sure. Speaking where she silenced. I was invited to keynote a summit at Margaret's old university. Yes, that university. The theme? Rebuilding ethical foundations in academic gatekeeping. My initial instinct was to decline. Why walk into a building built on ashes I'd rather leave buried? But then I remembered something Margaret once told me. Sometimes the loudest silence is your absence. And I refused to give her that silence. So I showed up. I stood at the same podium she once did, but with no illusions of grandeur. Only purpose. When systems protect people who destroy potential, it's not a flaw. It's a feature. And features can be rewritten. There was a mural in the hallway outside, once a tribute to distinguished female mentors. Margaret's photo used to hang there.
Now?
It had been replaced by a digital plaque. Legacy is accountability, not tenure. One more letter, but this time it was mine. For years, the idea of a recommendation letter left a sour taste in my mouth. It had been a weapon, a snare, a betrayal. But now, as I reviewed our first Halston grant applicants, I sat down to write one of my own. For a 24-year-old researcher from Tunisia named Layla, brilliant, shy but fiery when she spoke about science access in the global south. My hands trembled slightly as I typed. To whom it may concern, it is with full confidence and relentless joy that I recommend Layla for this position. She reminds me of everything I once fought to become, and more. She is not the future. She is the now. And we'd all be lucky to have her voice in our field. I paused, then added one last sentence. And unlike the letters that once chained me, this one is written in truth and hope. When I hit send, I felt lighter, like something had been rewritten inside me. 2. Josh's new mother figure. Here's the thing no one tells you about cutting out toxic family. It leaves a void, and that void needs filling, not with chaos, but with chosen care. Josh found that care in Geneva's community. Her name was Elisa, his colleague, 15 years older, part Swiss, part Nigerian, and very much the maternal energy he needed. She called him son in front of others. She brought him stew when he was sick. She told him when he was being ridiculous, and when he was being brave. And the first time she met me, she hugged me like we'd fought the same war. You protected him when his mother couldn't. Now, let us protect you. I didn't cry, but I almost did. Redefining the word home, we eventually moved to a quiet suburb outside Zurich, close enough for the city, far enough for stillness. My mornings were slow.
Tea.
Reading. No alarms. My nights? Full of purpose. Still working. Still advocating. But on my schedule. We had no kids yet. Maybe we never would. But I mentored dozens of women across 5 countries. Every one of them called me Dr. Halston. None of them called me Mrs. Weston. And that distinction? It mattered more than any title Margaret ever had. The moment I knew I had won. It wasn't at a conference. It wasn't in an article. It wasn't even when someone introduced me as the woman who took down Margaret Weston. It was this. A young intern, barely 21, stopped me after a panel. She held up her notebook and showed me what she'd written at the top in careful block letters. I have permission. She said nothing else. She didn't need to. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Because what Margaret had stolen from me all those years ago, the sense that I belonged, that I had permission to take up space, I had reclaimed. And now, I was handing it out like light in a dark room. Revenge is loud. But healing? It's quiet. It seeps in slowly, like sunlight through a cracked window after years of storm. And one morning I realized, I didn't think about Margaret when I woke up anymore. She wasn't in my thoughts, in my chest, in my inbox. She wasn't haunting my steps. She was gone. But the echoes of what she tried to destroy? They remained. Only now they weren't ghosts. They were roots. An anniversary of sorts. Exactly 5 years to the day since the university had rejected my scholarship based on Margaret's betrayal, I was asked to return, this time as the keynote speaker for their annual Future of Research Integrity Gala. I didn't hesitate. When I walked into that auditorium, something struck me. This was the very same stage where Margaret once gave her infamous mentorship as a moral obligation lecture, the one they used to make interns watch every summer. Now, that recording had been pulled, archived under retired leadership. Instead, I stood there. No PowerPoint, no printed speech. Just me, in black, with a single gold pin on my lapel. the logo of Women Without Permission. I looked at the crowd and said, I was told once that my place was behind a man, holding his coat, smiling softly, not asking for more. But today, I'm not behind anyone. I'm standing where I belong. And if that makes the old guard uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is a sign that change is already here. Letters from strangers. Over the next year, something began to happen. I started receiving letters, not recommendation requests, not accolades, but raw, handwritten confessions. One from a professor in Greece who admitted to looking away when a colleague silenced his female students. One from a lab tech in India who said, I thought what happened to you only happened to women in the West. I was wrong. One from a mother in New York whose daughter had dropped out of her master's program after a mentor made suggestive conditions for a conference invite. These letters didn't ask for advice. They simply said, thank you for being loud. And for the first time, I realized my pain had become permission, and my voice had become a weapon of repair. The panel that changed everything. The International Council on Academic Integrity invited me to chair a global committee on recommendation reform. Yes, the same system that Margaret once used as a weapon. Now I was helping to reshape it. We proposed a digital ledger for all recommendation letters, fully transparent, with traceable authorship and mandatory disclosures of conflicts of interest. Some called it radical. Some called it unnecessary. But when we rolled it out in beta to 10 universities, complaint reports dropped by 62% in just 1 year. Margaret's ghost couldn't touch that. Josh's mother never apologized. Let's be clear. Margaret never sent a second apology. Never emailed. Never wrote. Never reached out. And strangely, that was okay. I didn't need her guilt. What I needed was freedom. And I already had it. But I did find out one last thing about her. She'd moved to a small coastal town, changed her name slightly, and had reportedly joined a women's empowerment group. The irony nearly broke me into a laugh. They had no idea who she used to be. Or maybe they did. Maybe that was her way of asking forgiveness from the universe, since she couldn't give it directly to those she hurt. Either way, I no longer felt like tracking her shadow. I had my own light now. One final classroom. 3 years later, I returned to Geneva to teach a masterclass on ethics in scientific authorship. It was meant to be temporary, a 6-week course. But the students changed that. They asked hard questions. They challenged my perspectives. They referenced my own story in their essays and then, bravely, shared pieces of their own. One student stayed behind after the last class. She stood awkwardly by the podium before finally whispering, My mom told me to never trust a woman in power because she trusted the wrong one once. But you made me believe I can be one. I didn't speak. I just pulled her into a hug. Because that was it. That was the legacy Margaret tried to steal. Not my scholarship. Not my credibility. But my right to be someone's example. And here she was, not a victim. A torchbearer. The very last letter. I now keep one letter framed in my office. It's not Margaret's. It's mine, the one I wrote to myself on the day I got that rejection letter so long ago. Back then, I never mailed it. I just folded it, shoved it in a book, and forgot it. But when I found it again, years later, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I saw how wrong I was. It read, Dear me, I guess you weren't good enough. Maybe they were right. Maybe this dream was never yours to claim. Try to move on. Try to forget. Try to become someone smaller. That might be safer. I framed it as a reminder. Never trust the voice inside you that was trained by your abuser. Train it again. Speak to it kindly. Teach it to roar. Legacy rewritten. In the end, it wasn't about Margaret. It never really was. She was a storm, but I was the house. And now, my windows are open. My roof is strong. And every woman who enters the space I've built, she knows one thing without needing to ask. Her voice belongs here. Her ambition belongs here. She belongs here.